Hello, in this video I'm going to be talking about various ways of setting up your grid and customizing the grid. So let's first get a grid manager down. So here in core grid BP grid manager, I'm going to place this at 0 and I'm going to increase the size 12, something like that, why not? And let's place a unit so that we can walk around on the grid. I'm going to use BP unit anim. And here we are. Okay, so let's start by talking about tiles. So tiles, as I said in the last video, you can find them in the tiles folder. And in square, you have some tiles set up to work with a square grid. Also, as shown before, placing a tile on the map will block pathfinding, like so. But how is this set up exactly? Let me demonstrate with a few different kinds of tiles. So we have this tile here, which is called tile wall block, and we have this, which is just called wall, and we have another one here, which is called tile wall E for east. So a few different ones. And you can see that they behave differently, that we're able to walk behind this thin wall here, but that we have to move around it. For this one, we see that we can move around it. And for this one here, it's similar, just that we can also cut through corners of this tile. So how does this work? Well, each tile here on this grid are connected to its neighboring tiles through what are called edges. I won't go into that in detail in this video. I'll dive in depth into that in another video. But what these tiles essentially do is that they look at these edges that each of these tiles have, and it removes some edges based on the values that are defined within the edge cost variable of each tile, which you can see is a bit different for each of these three tiles. You can see that these edge costs, they are named after the cardinal directions, northeast, southwest, northeast, etc. So these are referring to the axes on the grid manager. So if you click the grid manager, then in the x-axis that will be east, and the y-axis will be south. So if you look at the grid manager from this rotation, then these naming conventions make sense. So for this tile here, we can see that it has an edge cost of 0 in every direction. What this means is at the start of the game, this tile looks at the tile that it's placed on, which is the tile here, below it, and then it looks at each direction and it changes the edge cost that was there before with an edge cost of 0, removing that edge from the grid. Actually, that's not entirely precise. It doesn't create an edge of 0, it just removes that edge. But what this means is that when pathfinding tries to enter this tile, it finds that the edge cost here, the edge does not exist, so it cannot enter, and the same if the unit starts within this tile and we start playing. You can see that we can't move anywhere because all of the directions are blocked for the pathfinding of this unit. We can also add tiles that have costs that are greater than 1. So if we add this 2 tile cost tile here, it is set up like that by default. So we can see here that it has a cost of 2 to enter this tile. So if we hit play, we see that the unit will want to avoid going into this tile, but we can still move through it. The amount of movement a unit has is defined within the unit, by the way, within move here, but I'll get more into how to customize units in a later tutorial. So back to this tile, so it has a cost of 2. If we just put all of this back to 1, we can see that it treats it as a regular tile. We can make it greater, or back to the same, to have it act as a higher cost again. There's one more setting remaining to discuss, and that is if we choose one of these actors, you can see here that they have edge costs of -1. And what does that mean exactly? Well, this is what is causing this tile here to block these corners so that you can't move around it. or that you have to take a long route and can't cut through corners as you can with this tile here. And so -1 is basically a special command that tells the toolkit at setup to look at the tile edges crossing the sides of this tile, which are outside where the tile is actually placed at, and then blocking off or changing the movement cost of those tiles. If you want to create your own tile, that's a pretty simple process. I can click here and then create a new blueprint. After right clicking, I search for tile, and here it is, BPGA tile. I will call this BPGA tile custom. By default it is invisible, we have no mesh, but it can still affect pathfinding in the same way as any other tile, as you will see. So if I set this here and I have increase the cost for all of these edges, we can see that he avoids this. It's like with this other tile here. Having invisible walls can be useful, of course, but we probably want to visualize this in some way, so we go into this tile actor here and we can add a static mesh, and we can choose from one of the static meshes that are included in the toolkit. Let's find one of the, like this crate here, which works well for a tile. Now you will see that there will be one issue here, that it does not snap to the grid currently, but it will still block the tile which it is placed on, or change the edge cost of that. So let's change the edge costs here to 0, and we will see that it blocks this, and we can move around it and behind it, but it is not centered on the tile. So the way to make it center on the tile and snap to the grid is to go into this and then attach it to the grid anchor, which is a scene component that is used for the grid snapping functionality. The grid snapping functionality is defined in the parent actor here. So now we can see that it automatically snaps to the grid. We can also make the location of this actor and the location of this mesh to be aligned by clicking this place actor at anchor button here. If we click away and click back, we can see that they are centered. We probably don't want to define the edges of a tile every time we place it, of course, so you can change this in the defaults here of this tile. So let's go to edge cost here, and I'm gonna put all of them to 0. Maybe I want to block the corners here, so I'll put all of these to -1 there. And now we can place more of these, and they will work just like that. So that's it for tiles. So tiles are nice and all, and they were the first method of manipulating grid edges that I added to this toolkit over 5 years ago. But I've since added other methods also that are very useful. It is possible to have the grid manager calculate edges based on the collision properties of meshes placed in the grid area. And that is what I'm going to show in the next video. But that's it for this video on tiles.